Hi, my name's Ed Thompson. I'm one of the lecturers at the University of Chester, principally in performance analysis, and that's what this talk will overview just now, with a particular focus on what is performance analysis and why should professional and elite sporting athletes and teams consider using it. Now, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to see that coaching at the elite and professional levels can be quite a stressful endeavour. So just a quick Google of angry coach or angry manager brings up obviously these four, but I could have chosen several thousand GIFs if I could fit them on this one slide. Clearly, then it's a highly stressful endeavour and highly stressful career for someone to opt for. And if we just take a step back and think about what a coach has to prepare to, fundamentally ensure the team perform as they ought to, the team or the athletes perform as they ought to, and fundamentally keep themselves in a job by keeping, the owners of clubs and various organisations happy, let's say. They've got to make sure that the players and the teams are um, in, I suppose, appropriate physiological condition. So essentially, they're fit enough to complete the demands of the game. If we're looking at football for a moment, that entails, about 10 to 13 kilometres of running per game. We know that a fair chunk of that these days is made up of high intensity sprints, so on and so forth. So the coach has got to make sure that the players are fit enough to meet those demands. We also know that the players need to be psychologically ready to perform as well. So again, this arguably is one of the tasks of the coach to ensure that the players are happy as individuals, but the team is also cohesive as a unit. They also then have to plan and strategize the appropriate tactics throughout the game. And those kind of issues obviously are numerous, let's say, but that's before we've even considered the tasks and duties that the manager has to complete outside of the kind of training and match environment. So obviously post-match interviews, um, interviews with various media outlets, and so obviously they've got quite a lot to do. Hence why they might become slightly angry at some point. I suppose if we then accept that they've got a lot to do, that's probably part of the justification for where sports science um, arrived from. Fundamentally, the coach has got a lot to do. Can he partition some of those jobs off to, experts in, match preparation in terms of, physical fitness? Can he partition some of those jobs to a psychologist, obviously to take care of that element, so on and so forth. And a key component of that multidisciplinary sports science team is indeed performance analysis. These are essentially experts with the kind of technical skills to quantify a football match, essentially. Let's say if the focus is on football for a moment. You might be thinking, well, why are they needed? And we'll have a little look at that on the next slide. Well, first and foremost, their viewing position is essentially pitch side. Not quite this angle because this is obviously slightly offset from one of the goals, but somewhere halfway line um, at the pitch side. And this is the kind of perspective they're going to get if they're lucky. With this play being near one of the team's goals, they're probably 50, 60 plus meters um, away from the ball with this particular scenario. So before we consider anything else, the viewing angle and their view of the game is probably suboptimal, I would suggest. And to compound matters, there's a wealth of evidence fundamentally suggesting that humans are fairly incapable of generating kind of valid and reliable accounts of principally things that they've viewed with their own eyes. And that probably results in coaches fundamentally leaving a match or a contest with a somewhat misguided overview of what went well, what didn't go well, who played well, who didn't play well, why the team won or lost or drew, so on and so forth. And now what I want you to do is to follow the instructions on this particular video clip. Fundamentally, I'll play it through and I want you to count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. Whilst doing so, I'll shut up and let you try and get the right answer.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Now, having watched that clip, hopefully you're not like Sven-Göran Eriksson, somewhat infamous football coach for England's international male team a few years back. Most notably infamous for being pretty rubbish as a manager, let's say. So I'm hoping in this instance that you'd be a bit more like Steve McLaren, and I suppose I'd be surprised if he got the right answer too. But nevertheless, in this scenario, he's suggesting that there were 16 passes in that video clip, which there were. So if you got 16 passes, good job. That's part one of the puzzle, I suppose. Now, I'm going to suggest a question to you now. Did you notice anything else? And I could bet my bottom dollar that Sven-Göran Eriksson wouldn't have noticed much else. That's me just being a bit tongue-in-cheek there. Now, if you're listening to me and all you got was 16 passes and you didn't see really anything else, you didn't kind of pay attention to anything else, that's fine. You're then probably thinking, well, what the hell is this fella waffling on about? Other things. Some of you, however, I would probably say about 50% of you might have noticed a gorilla. So yeah, those that saw the gorilla, you'd be thinking, yeah, I did see a gorilla. I'm glad he's mentioned that because it was a bit weird. Those that didn't see the gorilla probably now watching the clip going, what the hell? This has got even more weird. Why is this chap now talking about a gorilla amongst other things? Now, essentially, in the video clip that you just watched, a gorilla walks across the middle of the area where those players are passing the ball, beats his chest, and then continues walking. Only about 50% of people, despite that kind of, somewhat apparent visual stimulus popping up in the middle of the clip, appearing, only about 50% of people actually recognise the gorilla. Now, the issue is that you're so engrossed in quantifying the number of passes that are being made, because that's a task you were asked to complete. You're so engrossed in that. All your attentional resources are so focused on that, it's almost as if all else becomes completely redundant. Hence why you might have missed this gorilla that I'm talking about. I suppose I should fess up at this point and say I was certainly one of those first time I viewed the clip. But it's no bad thing, I suppose. It just means that you're extra attentive with the job that you've been asked to do. In addition to the 16 passes and the gorilla, there were also two other changes. Now, only about 1 in before people pick up on any of the other changes. But if we watch the clip back, you'll see that one of the players left the one of the teams, and then the curtain starts a deep red colour, and by the end of the clip it's a kind of golden yellow type colour. Quite prominent things that were certainly within your visual stimulus that you may or may not have picked up upon. So we'll go and look at that video clip now, and I'll say nothing whilst it plays out.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
So, having watched that video clip now, if you're honest enough to admit that you didn't notice the gorilla, you might be left thinking, bloody hell, how the hell did I not see a gorilla? And even if you did pick up the gorilla, it's fairly unlikely that you identified the player on the other team leaving and the curtain changing colour and getting the right number of passes. So I would suggest in the majority of people, there's kind of room for improvement, let's say, in using our visual stimulus to identify what's before our eyes, essentially. Now, the idea is, or the kind of psychological theory behind that, it's known as inattentional blindness, and it kind of reinforces the role of attention, in that we can divert pretty much all of our working memory and all of our attentional resources to something of interest, like counting the number of passes, at the expense of pretty much being blind to everything else in front of our eyes. If we think how rich and kind of how wide our sight is, and then if we reflect on that for a moment and think, well, how much do we actually retain of that eyesight in a given day? Very, very little. Eyesight works a bit like a spotlight, and then we'll only retain that information, that spotlight image, if we then kind of rehearse that information, rehearse that spotlight image that we've got in our mind. So then, how does that relate to a coach, and why might a coach need performance analysts? Bearing in mind, performance analysts are people who kind of quantify and annotate and appraise match performance. Why is it a coach needs performance analysts to supplement their job or help them with their job? Well, fundamentally, if you fail to see the gorilla or some of the other changes, then you liken that to a coach being pitch side 50 metres away, and then football 22 players, in rugby 30 players or however many, kind of running on and off and bashing each other, so on and so forth. Fundamentally, there's a lot going on. So it would be daft of us to assume that a coach could leave a football match with a kind of perfect account of everything that happened in a kind of sequential manner about who passed to who and so on and so forth. And research has actually confirmed that high-level football coaches only retain or are only able to recollect about 30, perhaps to 50% at the top end, 30 to 50% of a match that they've just viewed. And more importantly, coaches will tend to remember information about the important phases of play, like goal scoring efforts and shots on target and stuff of the like, at the expense of probably the more subtle features of a match about possession play, and often if we accept that a shot on goal is the result of a significant period of possession whereby a team's kind of probing down the right flank, then the left, back into the centre, trying to work a bit of space, and then all of a sudden there's 2 through balls in quick succession before a shot off on goal. If all the coach is able to leave that match remembering is this shot on goal, he'll have arguably missed the kind of important phases of play leading up to that, so he won't necessarily know why the team had that particular shot. And that's fundamentally where performance analysts come in. They're there to develop that kind of comprehensive appraisal of match performance, let's say. Now, performance analysts have various tools available to them, and we've got them at the university. Various softwares ranging from kind of apps on iPhones and Android phones, tablets, iPhones, so on and so forth, up to the more comprehensive computer-based systems that essentially allow you to, let's just say, go to town, appraise everything and everything, let's say. And it's these softwares that you'll be exposed to as part of the degree program at Chester. Fundamentally to ready anyone interested in those kind of positions. Now, during the face-to-face open day type demonstrations, we've got a load of apps laid out across the PA lab, and we have prospective students use the app. It's kind of all there ready to go, let's say. Obviously, because coronavirus has wreaked havoc with life as we know it, let's say. We're not in those favourable conditions. But what I want you to do is fundamentally try and keep tabs, try and keep a tally, let's say, on the number of punches thrown by the boxer in the top left-hand area. So he's currently stood just behind the referee, let's say. Slightly kind of aged footage because it's a very prominent boxing match from the 90s now, but I use it for a reason, because there are a bloody lot of punches thrown, so it's no easy task. But what I fundamentally want you to do is keep a running tally in your mind of the number of punches thrown by this guy up here. Mickey Ward, his name is, in case you're ever interested.
Keep fighting through this kind of action.
Ward landed 42 out of 71 punches.
We're not sure about Gaddy because he hasn't been in this kind of a war with as strong a fighter as Ward before.
That body shot again. That's the body shot. It's the left hook to the body. Ward's money punch, and this knockdown counts.
And he is hurt.
This is it. He's not going to recover. It's not like a head punch.
He may not be able to recover.
I don't think so. And Ward is going to go right back down there again, right to the body again. He's still hurting from the body punch also still, in addition to the head. Arturo Gatti refusing to go down as Mickey Ward pounds away.
In the past, this is where Arturo Gatti has been dangerous.
But Ward should go back to the body again. Gatti risking another low blow penalty to try to get Ward off of him, and lands another big shot.
Burton, did Ward punch himself out for the time being with that tremendous barrage in the first minute? Just look at this.
Unbelievable. Can you believe there's still a minute and a half to go in the round? Gatti blinking away the blood in his right eye. Can't see out of the right eye. Vicious body shots by Gatti. Ward nods as if to say, come on, come on. Come on, let's fight. Now, Gatti is trying to get a break. Ward should go right back to the body. That's where he's to go to the body. You know, you dream of fights like this, but very seldom do they live up to the expectation. This is even more than you could dream of. Just imagine if you bought a ticket. Stop it, Frank. You can stop it any time. Arturo Gatti's out on his feet. Frank Cappuccino's going to let him keep going.
Gatti doesn't even have the strength to tie Ward up.
And Ward is tied. And here comes Gatti back. Less than
So a pretty brutal contest, nonetheless. But just as a quick recap, keep that number in your head. So I asked you to count the number of punches thrown by Mickey Ward.
Keep fighting through this kind of action.
And the official stats provider for the fight suggested those are the numbers. So they don't include jabs, so they might be significantly lower than the value you've got in your head. So we can forget about those just for a moment. However, I will show you the right numbers now. Now, I kind of know the right because I've used the computer software that I referred to earlier on, or one of the available computer softwares I referred to earlier on. And with that, you can essentially slow the footage down. You can pause, rewind, go back, such that I'm pretty confident that these numbers are going to be accurate, let's say. So let's see. Now, I asked you to record the number of punches thrown by the red boxer, as I've got it here, the chap called Mickey Ward. And I'm going to hazard a guess and say you probably didn't get 122. You might not be there. You might not be too far off. And actually, if you got anywhere around 122, that's kudos to you. Let's say you might have a job as a performance analyst waiting for you post degree. Let's say. If you didn't get 122, then some of the reasons might be because you're viewing it on a PowerPoint slide, suboptimal conditions, let's say. But fundamentally, the kind of speed of play, let's say, doesn't allow real-time analysis to be, entirely accurate. Now, I've been involved in boxing for a very long time myself. There's no way I would have watched that and got the right number. Certainly first time round anyway. So obviously these computer softwares facilitate an accurate and comprehensive analyses, let's say. But even if we forget about the kind of complex analyses for a minute, even if all we did was use one of the apps to record the number of punches thrown by the red and the blue boxer, and let's assume we did an okay job with the numbers, create quite useful information, I suppose. So all we looked at was the number of punches. But when you use the app, you get a timestamp, so it tells you within that round where those punches were recorded. Was it the first 10 seconds? Was it 52 seconds? So on and so forth. And essentially, with that information, we're able to depict quite useful observations, I suppose. And I've termed it, a tale of 3 minutes, in the sense that in the first minute, the red guy who we were quantifying far outperformed the opposing boxer, the blue boxer, as I got him down, Arturo Gatti. However, it's almost as if he overdid it in the first minute and tired himself out temporarily, because in the second minute, the roles were certainly reversed, let's say. However, in the final minute, the roles were reversed once again, meaning that our guy, the red guy, significantly outperformed the opposing boxer. And I suppose in that final minute, I certainly watched that now, and I'm wondering how the referee didn't stop it, given the blue boxer was out on his feet. Let's say he looked half dead, for want of a better phrase. So simple stats can provide quite useful data, let's say. And if that's going back to a coach, that kind of information might be gold dust to them and allow them to really plan and plot an appropriate strategy, in the sense that with these 3 minutes here, if we were the red boxer, maybe a more even strategy across the 3 minutes would be a useful idea, because we worked too hard in the first minute and then we took a bit of a beating in the second minute. So how about adopting a more even strategy, perhaps? Food for thought, let's say. And bear in mind, obviously, here we've only scratched the surface, that's for sure. Now, in football, they make far more of performance analysis than most sports, potentially because there's more money available, certainly at the upper echelons of professional football. This is just an example from Leicester City, and I suppose if I went back, I don't know, maybe 5, definitely 10 years, I would bet my bottom dollar that they only employed, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 or 4 performance analysts. However, in the more recent years, there's been an explosion of positions at Leicester, and this is kind of indicative of the role that performance analysis plays at most professional football clubs. So clearly, there's a lot of performance analysis positions available, which is grand for obviously graduates of sport and exercise sciences degree, where performance analysis is embedded in the course, as is the case at Chester. Somewhat humorously, I finished there on a goalkeeper analyst, bearing in mind that Liverpool didn't used to have a goalkeeper analyst. And for those of you that still remember the let's call it concussion gate, where Carriers claimed he was concussed and Liverpool took a bit of a hiding in the Champions League final. Lo and behold, since that time, Liverpool now have a goalkeeping analyst as well. Of course, they've also got a better goalkeeper. But anyway, let's not go there. Okay, that's it from me. If you've got any questions that you want to follow up with, then definitely get in touch, and I'll get back to you, no problem. Hopefully that kind of whistle-stop tour of performance analysis has provided you with some insight to the rather important role that the analysis team can play in I suppose, supporting the coach to maximise performance for individual athletes and teams. I know there was a somewhat predominant focus on football and then boxing latterly, but principally those kind of ideas about quantifying performance to support coaching decisions and support tactical strategies and stuff of the like can pretty much be applied to most sports, let's say. And at Chester, we have kind of bespoke performance analysis modules, whereby you're able to, I suppose, apply the principles of performance analysis to your own sport of interest. So I know when I arrived at Chester, I was interested in boxing. I was competing at the time, and I essentially applied performance analysis to boxing, and I suppose I haven't looked back since, really. Thanks for your time, and as I say, just to reiterate, if you've got any questions, then please get in touch. Thank you.